Good evening and welcome to The Square. Tonight's conversation is going to focus on the phenomenon of what social media influencers are. We're also going to see the frameworks, the ethical frameworks in which social media influencers operate, as much and many more other issues to do with social media influencing in this day and age. My name is Dana Mpisi, host of The Square, and joining us for this show, we have with us guests, and I'll start with our first guest, who is a journalist and also social media influencer. His name is Edmund Kagire. Edmund, welcome to The Square. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great, welcome to The Square. We are also joined with Emmanuel Mugisha, who is the Executive Secretary at the Rwanda Media Commission. We're still trying to connect with him, but we will do so shortly. As always, we are joined by The Square's resident panelists, and I'll start with you, Brennan Amata. Great to have you on The Square tonight.
Thank you, Dan.
As always. We are also joined by Charles Herber. Great to have you on the show.
Same here, Diana. How are you?
Good.
Good.
Great. So we're here to talk about social media influencing, what it constitutes, who is a social media influencer, or rather, what is the definition of a social media influencer, and how do they influence how we consume information. And just before we kick off, as we always do, we're going to just touch on some midweek highlights, things that have caught the attention of the Square resident panelists. And I'll start with you, Berna. Is there something that you'd like to share?
I was so sure Charlie was beginning.
Yes. Is there anything you'd like to share?
I have to disclose that King Faisal has not paid me.
For what?
For what I'm about to say.
Okay.
But today evening, they made an announcement about something called epidural.
Epidural?
Yes, and I'm sure many women are excited about it. I mean, for a very long time, this is like a discovery that has happened for a very long time, but for some reason it's not been accessible, affordable, again, on the Rwandan.
So what was the announcement exactly? That they'll make epidurals more accessible?
It's available, yes, at King Faisal.
Was it not available before, when women are giving birth?
And I wouldn't want to get into the
Okay.
detail. The other thing is also, I've seen there's a rights issue coming up on the stock exchange, which is quite interesting, because if you see a company issuing a rights issue at this point, it points to something. Again, I won't get into the detail, but it's exciting that the stock exchange is getting some activity recently, especially during COVID.
Absolutely, yeah. Especially during these times. Charles, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I picked something in the local media today. I think the guys at Higher Education Council appeared before PAC, and there was an allegation around ghost students. So I dug into the story, and I saw that there's actually a student who died years ago, and in the system he continues to get his bursary, his or her bursary. And it points to very serious anomalies in the system, and it's quite concerning that in our fight for better utilization of our meager state resources, that we can have ghost students. Yes,
that's a first. I've not heard of that before in Rwanda. So before we kick off, I'd just like to see if we can get back in touch with Emmanuel Mugisha, who's here on behalf of the Rwanda Media Commission. And if not, I think we'll have to reach him via phone. But before we do, I want us to just quickly go to a social media feed and look at some of the tweets that have been coming through when we announced the topic for tonight. And the first tweet is from Ivan Mugisha, who says, a must-watch for the show tonight. In my view, this has evolved over time, especially when it comes to journalists. Now I find it unjustifiable to earn from openly endorsing an event, product, or company or policy as a journalist when I may be required to write a critical story about the same. Interesting views from Ivan. Brenna, I'm sure you'd like to weigh in on that later on in the show. We also have another tweet coming in, and this tweet is from Nsanga Sylvie. And Nsanga Sylvie says that mind about the well-being of the people. They should focus on few subjects they understand and passionate about. Sadly, some are all over because they are money-driven and do not understand and don't even understand the topics they're influencing. So we're definitely already debating this on social media. We have another tweet coming in from Sabaniro, and Emma states that a social media influencer is a user who has established credibility in a specific industry and can persuade others to act based on their recommendations. So journalists should not be excluded from monetizing their influence as long as professionalism is not compromised. Great points to put across. I'm looking forward to Brenna and Charles debating over this. You, of course, from a media perspective, and Charles, from your perspective of looking at social media influencers as individuals. I'd like us to go quickly and touch base with Emmanuel Mugisha. If you can have him connected. Emmanuel, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Great to have you. This show would be impossible without your take on the matter. So thank you once again for tuning into the Square and joining the Square.
Thank you for inviting me.
Good. So I will just kick off with the first question. And this question is addressed mainly to you, Edmund. And if we can start with defining the word influencer. You call yourself an influencer, and according to the January 2019 We Are Social report, around 3.4 billion people around the world actively use social media. This is basically, around 45% of the world's population. So, Edmund, if you can, as someone who identifies as a social media influencer, and looking at it in a Rwandan context, because let's bring it home a bit, what, or rather, who is considered a social media influencer?
Thank you, Diana. I think to me, the definition of an influencer is not confined to Rwanda alone. I think it's more of a general term that we need to look at it the way it is worldwide. I think to me, an influencer is someone who has the power to influence or impact the purchasing decisions or opinions of a group of people who follow him or her. I would say it is an old craft. It has been around, only that now it is more digital. But I think if you look way back, you can find celebrities, musicians, sports personalities, being brand ambassadors, and also, as we are seeing today in the Black Lives Matter movement, trying to influence opinion and the mindset and feelings of people. So it's a very wide a term to define in one sentence.
So, just very quickly, if you, I'm sure you saw some of the tweets that put forward. You're here as a journalist and influencer. What do you say to people who say that you can't be both? They're mutually exclusive. Your journalistic ethics are compromised. There's just no way that can happen. That one can be a journalist responsible for impartial and accurate information. At the same time, you're endorsing brands as well as products.
I think this is it's a complicated debate. There's a very thin line. I think Bana knows we've had this conversation before, and we've respectfully disagreed on how one can be an influencer and a journalist at the same time. But I think there's a report, the 2019 report it's called the 2019 Global Comms Report by PR Week and Cision. It actually shows that people today prefer journalists as influencers more than, let's say, musicians or other types of people, because for sure journalists are able to identify with the people, to research and speak facts to the people about whatever they're influencing. So it's a thin line. Of course, when we talk about conflict of interest, as Ivan mentioned, that you cannot advertise an event and then be able to critically report about it. I think when a journalist is an influencer, at the same time, they have the responsibility to see what they are going to relate with. First of all, you don't influence anything. As Sylvie said, you don't jump on every topic. You don't be all over the place. But I would say in Rwanda's context, let's look at a number of facts. If you want to look at the paycheck in the media industry today in Rwanda, journalists are not the best paid in this country. I would say we don't rank among the best paid people. So influencing is, I would say, as they always say, our side hustle. I'll give you an example. If Charles called me today and said, Edmund, I have a building and I have space I would need you to tell people about so that they can come and rent out this building and do their businesses in this building. I don't see where the conflict of interest is in this case. If I'm just advertising a building, even if I write articles about construction and maybe urban development and all that, I really can't find where the conflict of interest is. So for me, this is just a side gig. This is a gig economy. Everybody is trying to make ends meet. So I don't see any reason why journalists would be limited in also trying to make ends meet. If you look around in the region, if you go to Kenya, I think you all know Jeff Koinange was here recently. He has about 1.7 million followers on Twitter. He ranks among the top 10 followers in the region, not in Africa. The likes of Betty Mutei-Chalo, all these are senior journalists in Kenya. They earn very well compared to us, but they still influence trends and whatever people consume on the internet, and they are paid handsomely for that. So you can argue that, I'm sure Bana knows that in Kenya, the paycheck is very good for journalists, but still they find a way to be influencers and at the same time continue doing their job without compromising any of the two, whether it's influencing and journalism. So it's a thin line, so it goes down to an individual. If I'm called by a client, it's my duty to first assess and see if I relate to this client, if I understand the topic, and if I said something about that topic using my social media platforms, people will actually, understand or even follow whatever we are trying to push. So it's a very thin line, and I think journalists cannot be left out on this, as we all struggle to make ends meet, especially in this time of COVID-19.
Thank you. Before we go to our guest, Emmanuel, I would like to hear from Bernard, simply because Edmund has mentioned your name several times, when he's talking about this, and obviously you've had a conversation together. What's your take on this, briefly, before we go to Emmanuel?
First of all, hi, Edmund.
Don't mince your words.
Hi, Edmund, and thank you very much for coming to the show. Like you rightly pointed out, we've had this debate going on, and several of my colleagues and friends in the media that are doing influencing, we don't look eye to eye when it comes to this issue, simply because personally, as a matter of principle, I feel that journalists and journalism, it's such a privilege to be a journalist, and that comes with a lot of responsibility. As journalists, we enjoy many privileges that quite often we, I think, take for granted, and as such, when we become celebrities or become public figures, we don't seem to understand or perhaps lose the sense of where this is coming from. It is the platform, the journalistic platform that elevates you to that kind of status, to be able to influence. Now, I understand that there are economic hardships. Journalists, like he pointed out, are poorly paid, but we are not alone. There are other professions that do critical work that are poorly paid. We can talk about teachers, we can talk about doctors, we can talk about security agencies. Most of them are poorly paid. But, the way I look at journalism, it's more about, it's a public service. So, and with that, it's difficult to kind of commercialize your service or your contribution. So it is true that many journalists will do it as a side hustle based on the reality on the ground. There are many newsrooms that cannot afford to pay salaries, and journalists have families too that they have to feed. But I think the question is, journalists can do other things that do not compromise their independence or their reputation as journalists. There's no one stopping a journalist from doing business or being a farmer, or because the problem with social media and influencing and the platform is that, first of all, most of the time you will attract a following because you are attached to a certain media house. And with time, on your feed, on your social media feed, if you post, because now, again, because of the trends around social media influencing, it's more subtle. So they will come up with a post that, unless you're critical, you will not realize that this person is actually trying to promote a brand. You know, the influencing has advanced from just saying, oh, buy ABCD, to now, you know, coming up with subtle statements that sort of direct you to a certain policy or certain, you know, we've seen especially a lot of this even around civil society organizations, you know, getting journalists and asking them to tweet about certain policies. So, and it's a dilemma. It's an ethical dilemma. It's a tough one because, again, the reality on the ground. But I feel that at the end of the day, it's a personal choice. You really have to make the sacrifice and choose. Personally, I believe that if you want to make money, if you want to be rich, journalism is the wrong place. You know,
in the first place.
It's in the wrong place. You know, it's peanuts. So it's the wrong place. You have to choose another profession that allows you to really go out there and compete and make money. Yeah, and also the high standards that are required of us, because as journalists, we are all the time in the business of criticizing others and saying this is going wrong and this is going wrong, but who holds us to account? You know, who holds us to account? How transparent are we? And the trend currently, you know, what we are seeing with in the digital space, journalism has lost credibility. And I feel that part of the influencing that we're doing is against us. You know, it's contributing to the final, you know, it's like a nail in the coffin for journalism, professional journalism. So it's a tough one, but these are individual choices, and I respect that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Charlie, if you'd allow us to just go to our guest before you also weigh in. Emmanuel Mujisha, thank you for accepting our invitation to come here. And of course, you're here in your capacity as a, you know, Rwanda Media Commission Executive Secretary. And, you know, this is what we're talking about. Journalists accepting payments to endorse certain brands. This has sparked an ethical debate, a debate where people are questioning journalistic ethics and whether they're compromised. Brenna has weighed in, and we'd like to hear we'd like to hear from you regarding what not only Brenna said, but what Edmund said earlier on.
Yeah, thank you, Dana, and thank you, everyone. I think what Bana just said is the truth of the matter. You know, she just said that journalism is a public service. When something like that is mentioned, that means that journalists have ethical guidelines that govern them in serving the public, and they should do that within the limits of those ethical guidelines. Now, social media has brought, as a matter of fact, ethical dilemmas in the profession of journalism. As Edmund just said, yes, there is need for that money, and of course, businesses and other people want to buy journalists are using that opportunity to buy them. But again, the issue is based on two important things. Will a journalist retain his neutrality, which is a fundamental principle of the ethics? will they retain their independence, which is also another fundamental ethical value when it comes to conflict of interest. For instance, I buy Kajire's followers because that's what they buy, to promote my brand or to promote my product. And then it happens that this product is faulty, and it is in the interest of the public to know the story behind everything. Do you think such a journalist, in this case Edmund, will be independent enough to cover that story objectively? That is the big question. The issue is not about influencing, but the issue is how ethical are you going to retain how are you going to retain the independence, the neutrality in covering stories that mean a lot to the public, so into public service, while gaining from the very product that you're trying to promote? I think that's where the big issue is. So in our case, we believe that journalism should be independent, and all factors, whether external or internal, that may influence their business should really be shunned, should be avoided. But again, the fact is, these people need this money. So the debate is a tough one.
Emmanuel, Charles, over to you. I'm sure you also have a lot of opinions on this topic.
Well, I'm not too sure, but whether it's Edmund really hammered the nail on the head. I think it's purely about survival. And I really want to address something that I think Emma touched on a little bit, and it's predominantly around reputation and reliability. It's okay to have 1 million followers, and I mean, it's everyone you want to, as long as you're on social media. The other day I was having a discussion at a club, and someone came up to me and attacked me, not really physically, but said, I inboxed you a message and you did not respond to me. I followed you and you did not follow me back. So I felt a bit guilty.
On your social media or
yes,
email?
No, on my social media feed.
Okay.
So he DM'd me on Twitter. So while we're close to each other, I went. He said, "Well, you check right now." So I went. Now, when I went to the message, of course, I was a little bit embarrassed, but I realized he only has less than 20 followers. Now, I said, let me be truthful to this young man, and I told him, no, as a matter of principle, I will not follow you back if you do not have at least 500 followers.
Oh, you said that to him?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, I don't have 500 followers.
Yes.
Well, I'm stuck with you every day of the week, so I just have to follow you. But luckily for me, he took it in good faith. And to which he says that are there many people like you? Is that what usually happens? Because he had also opened his Twitter account, I think, in June or July 2020, and he said, "Is this something? I'm new to this." I'm like, "Yes." He's like, "I'm going to work it. I'm going to work on growing my readership." So where am I going? I mean, my followers. Where am I going with this conversation? That if you're to be reliable, it's not enough to have that many followers, and that is really the point I think that Emma sort of alluded to. The thin balance, how are you going to go back and pinpoint about, for argument's sake, the mess in Rayon Sport as a journalist when you're going to go to Ferwafa and say, come and watch football games, So it's that reliability that really comes into play once you're being paid for to make noise over something. Yeah.
That's true. Before we go to our social media feed, I'd like to obviously hear from Edmund. Edmund, what's your take on this? Between Bernard, between Emmanuel, Charles, and also a social media feed, do you still maintain your position? I mean, you said earlier on it is really a matter of individual decision, and it's also a thin line in terms of navigating between the two.
But certainly this is something new we are all grappling with. It's the disruption that technology has. This is something that's not even a decade old. So it's, as you want to believe, it's something that we are yet to come to terms with. And also, if I could ask Mugisha, I know the code of ethics we have does not mention anything on how we use our social media platforms. So we are trying to come up with a new code of ethics that can touch on all these things. But I think as we go forward, many people are going to understand that journalists do have brands, and the brands they build over time are not in a way connected to the places they work, the places that employ them. I think our brands come before the places that employ us. I'm happy that I found a new, sorry to say this, but I found a boss that understands how the dynamics of social media and the digital world, and the digital space. And he has no problem with me doing whatever I do on my social media platforms with my brand, as long as I don't cross the line and show some conflict with the same organization that employs me. Now, if you look the world over, actually this report I was reading, you will find Anderson Cooper among the top media influencers. And I don't think Anderson Cooper can be compromised by anything, or you can doubt his credibility when it comes to how he does his journalism. So it's something that perhaps as we go on, we'll find more research and more details to help us understand how journalists can strike a balance between what they do with their brands and their work as journalists.
Thank you.
So I want to end with one point. I've seen some accusations leveled against us that most times we don't speak out on issues because maybe these organizations or institutions pay us to influence for them. And some of these accusations sometimes are not true, because mostly if you find the kind of work we do, it does not relate to government or government institutions. We usually deal with private clients and or maybe, let's say, NGOs that want to push messages to the community, let's say COVID messages and all that. So in a way, we are all conscious that whatever we do can compromise our work as journalists. So this is something we don't need to be taught about. And it's something that perhaps as we go on, people are going to understand that there's that balance that we also have to strike, and we are aware of it, and we are aware of our responsibility as journalists. We have not lost the first responsibility, which is us being journalists, and then later on trying to influence opinions and mindsets using our brands.
Thank you very much, Edwin. I would like us to go to the next point, but before I do, I want to hear from you, Charles. But I just want to steer the conversation, move away from journalists and ethics and social media, and look at the mental health of young people who are influenced by social media, influencers who put forward very inauthentic and sort of extreme falsities about their lives, and the pressure and aspirations, and how young people are affected by this. But before I do, Charles, very quickly over to you.
It may not be too far from that. And I really want to make a point around influencing, as the English word suggests. Now, you're going to put yourself in a position as an influencer where you'll persuade people to think in a certain direction, to like a certain product, to follow a certain service, to like Bana's opinion and dislike Diana's because of who you are and the number of followers that you have. Now, because you wield that power, I think you should have a moral obligation to have some domain expertise. And I'll just throw a wild example, say, about basketball. I think in October or November, in October, we're going to host a big basketball tournament, BAL Africa. The social media influencers, come journalists, are going to be stepping over each other's toes to get a gig. Yet probably 60% of them do not know about basketball. So how are you going to influence people or to persuade people in a certain direction, yet you don't have the domain expertise? So it's back to, I'm really coming in to emphasize my earlier point around reliability. If you want to be credible, you better invest in yourself. Edmund talks about a brand, and he's absolutely right. That if Edmund wants to command the respect that an influencer should command, he should just not be driven by the money, because there isn't enough money being made in journalism. Yes. So the domain expertise and the power to persuasion should really drive influencers in whatever topics that they're persuading people to have thorough knowledge. Yes,
absolutely.
Yes. I think very briefly, for the record, it's not against the law to do influencing, so it's within the rights, for anybody to do it. But I'm very keen on emphasizing the responsibility and the privileges that come with being a journalist. I feel that if you're going to do more influencing work, then I think some of the privileges should be taken away.
Such as?
That allow you to be a journalist. Because, for instance, as journalists, when you have your card, you can access so many places using your card as a journalist. As we speak, I don't think influencers have those press cards, for instance, that allow them access wherever. Now, if you're taking your press card and it is granting you access to places, and instead of doing work in public service, you're doing work, commercial work, already that is a problem. So I understand the economic pressure, but I think, again, it's an individual choice. You want to stick to being professional and trying to do the right thing, or making ends meet.
Making ends meet.
Yeah.
So let's take the conversation. The second half of the conversation is really to do with young people, because social media influencing, it's millennials and younger. These are people who are really impacted by this whole concept of social media and influencers and how they consume information, but also their aspirations, how they look at life, how they look at achievement. And what I want to emphasize right now is the falsities of social media influencers. People take pictures and you think someone has a perfect life, and you have studies that show young people being depressed or suffering from mental health issues due to social media, and caused largely in part with the inaccurate portrayals of social media influencers. And I want to go to Emmanuel and hear what you'd like to say about that.
Yeah, thank you, Diana. You're right. Child protection online is something that is being thought about from different angles, but mainly from the policymakers and academia. So child protection is something that everyone should be thinking about, but it starts with, again, the parents, because we need to educate the young kids and young adults about the right way of consuming and making use of these social media platforms, something we are lacking today. We see people on Instagram, they're happy, they're enjoying it, but they don't have the ethics of engaging on those social media platforms. And this is something that people should be taught even in schools. Again, we need to invest a lot in media and digital literacy, because we have the good sides of social media, but the bad sides, we haven't thought about them very deeply and try to find solutions to the challenges that they bring to us. But as you said, child protection online is something that everybody should be concerned about, starting from the parents, the teachers, our policymakers, and even come up with tangible strategies on how to address this issue, because that's the way we can protect our kids and the next generation to be consuming social media and exploiting it.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Bernard, Charles, would you like to weigh in on that regarding social media and youth and mental health when it comes to influences and inauthentic portrayals of their lifestyles?
I think Emmanuel just mentioned it. There's need really for media literacy, for social media literacy, for people to understand what social media is and the reality of social media, because not many people will understand, for instance, the dynamics around influencing. Really, most people don't understand influencing as a business as such. So this is why there's a lot of spotlight on journalists, especially where there's no transparency around the influencing, you know, to clearly indicate that you've been paid to do this, you know, because there's no harm in getting paid, but the transparency, you know, again, going back to the ethics. So there's a lot on social media, whether it is images that are edited, and there's so much really going on. So unless you are really in the business of social media, you would not understand the dynamics, and it can be overwhelming. There are many people who get depressed because they haven't, maybe if they post a picture, they don't get enough likes, or there are mean comments to their posts. You know, there's stress around that. And it is an issue, you know. So I think somebody has to take up the responsibility. I don't know who, probably government, to raise this awareness. We've also seen increasingly there's room for fact-checking and verification. Videos are edited and put on social media. People will look at it and think it's true, yet someone has played around, you know. So it's, if you ask me right now, some of the biggest threats that we face are actually on social media. We have moved away from a time when the major threats were, you know, gunfire and all these things, to, you know, the propaganda on social media. There's so much that is happening on social media. So there has to be a lot of awareness around what social media is and how these platforms are manipulated and people doing different things. Yeah.
Charles?
Yeah, I just want to link some of these ills of society with influencers and try to marry it with making money out of being an influencer, whether you're a journalist or otherwise. I would compare it to the corporate social responsibility of influencers. That you should not only be drumming when you're being paid, but when there is an ill in society like mental stress, or like lack of public toilet facilities in Kigali, or fake news, as Bana was saying, and you know, we can give several other examples that should, you know, because sometimes I personally get disturbed by these Rwandan influencers with their millions of followers who decide to keep quiet because there is no monetary gain for them. And I think that's a serious shortcoming on their part. Yes.
I would like us to quickly go to a Twitter feed and look at what our viewers are sharing on Twitter. The first tweet we have is from Richard, who says that influencers are people who have built a reputation for their knowledge and expertise, and due to that, they have generated numbers of followers. To me, it is ethical for them to look into generating revenues by creating trends for certain brands they honestly believe in. So Richard is of the opinion that, you know, please go ahead by all means, but factoring in ethical considerations. We have another tweet coming in from Peggy. Peggy states, and this goes to your point, Brenna, on transparency. She says that journalists could be influencers, but they always have to indicate when the information is a paid advert. Consumers will then be able to use judgment and not just rely on the journalist. Before we go to our next tweet, that's
very valid.
That's what you're saying, Brenna.
Yeah. Transparency, yeah.
Exactly. We have more tweets coming in, and we have another tweet from Stella. And Stella Musoni asks that, got it, absolutely understand that everyone needs to make ends meet, but at some point you need to make a choice. It's almost impossible to confidently claim journalistic integrity while being paid by the subject of your reporting. and we are going to go to our other tweets, but I think this is what Edmund mentioned earlier on, that journalists will assess and obviously look at the sort of social media influencing that they're being asked to do, and assess the situation before doing so. We have another tweet coming in from Junior Sabina, and Junior states that I'm not against anyone trying to put food on their table, but journalists using their platforms to influence our purchasing decisions, etc., the very process has the potential to compromise their integrity. After all, he who pays the piper calls the tune. I want to listen to what Edmund has to say to this before we go to our next tweet. Edmund, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
What?
The first question you asked about influencing young people using our platforms. One, I will not speak for others, but for myself and for at least for the ones known to me, we don't purport to be what we are not when we do what we do with our social media platforms. That is very clear. We don't pretend to be leading some luxurious lifestyles because of what we do with our social media platforms. We try to be as real as possible. If we push a product, we believe in it. If we push a campaign, let's say about stopping teen pregnancies, we believe in that. So we are real, actually. One of the reasons people come for us, and I would like to clear something. Charlie said that, let's say, Africa is coming, the continental basketball competition is coming to Rwanda, and then we go falling over each other. Normally, we don't bid for deals or gigs. People come for us because they believe in us, because they trust that we understand the subject matter they want us to talk about. So we don't go competing for, I don't know, maybe other people do it, but I don't know whether people go asking for social media influencing gigs. So we try to be as real as possible. Most of the gigs I've worked on are things I either believe in or are things I believe have value to the country, not just anything. So we don't try to push some sort of propaganda, some sort of misleading or misinforming agendas, or to try and influence policy here and there. So we are very realistic in what we do, at least from our point of view, from my point of view and my colleagues I work with. It's a small group of people which I know. And to say that, again, I gave you examples, guys. I said, look at Jeff Koinange. So I can't purport to be more credible than our senior colleagues elsewhere who are earning using their platforms, and at the same time keeping their journalistic ethics, intact. So I understand whatever everyone is saying. I appreciate that people are actually weighing in on this topic. It's a very new topic. So I'm taking in all these views people are giving us, and perhaps it will make us more careful going forward in whatever we do. But certainly people will have to understand that we know we are towing a very thin line, and we cannot put our responsibility as journalists aside for the money. It's not actually a lot of money, and it's just, I don't know, people think it's a big industry and we are reaping a lot of money, which is not true.
Edmund, yeah, so, thank you very much, Kajire. I'd like us to go back to the Twitter feed because it's really important to also hear from people and how they're understanding the questions they have, the questions on what constitutes social media influencing and the like. We'll get back to you and back to you, Charles and Brenna. And we have a tweet coming in from Richard. Again, it seems to be the key issue with our viewers tonight is to do with transparency. And Richard states that my issue with influencers is transparency. Journalists or not, should influencers accept deals for products that they do not even use or know about? Should influencers be held accountable for false promotion if an event or product fails? We risk losing authenticity. Before we go to our next tweet, Brenda, do you have a quick response to that? It's what you've been saying.
Yeah,
it's what you've been saying. Charles?
First of all, just a mild comment on Edmund. Earlier today, he tweeted that he would be in the hot seat. And I wanted to tell him that we don't have things like hot seats on the square, but from the look of things and how the show is progressing, it seems all the guns are on him. I think it's because he's the one who's in the line of fire. He's the biggest influencer we have amongst the five of us on the show.
Well,
but,
the show is part of building his bigger brand as an influencer. So either way, he doesn't lose anything.
Yes, but specifically in regards to what Richard did say, indeed it's a dilemma. Today I was coming into the show and someone told me today is Wednesday, and I'm told you're talking about influencing. My club was closed during the course a few days ago, I think in the last 1 week. There's other people who operate like me, so and he's very disturbed. He's like, this. So no, a form of magic. Places open. But I think that society, and because those be as.
And this is from Musani. What do you have to say?
The bonus, but by the time these platforms came, where we were working at the time, I would not. But certainly, because and see where we want to be, who just jump and like someone mentioned that we can mislead people. So for me, if someone comes to me and says, push for me this, push for me so that they open for me my bar, and I know there are government directives that prohibit this and that during this COVID period, I will not do that because simply I know it's very wrong, so I will not take on that assignment. So followers come because of what we post, then eventually I don't know, I don't even qualify myself as an influencer, but I believe what I share is followed by very many people. Sometimes I post a video and it's viewed by, more than 30,000 people. I posted a video the other day I was covering a story at the airport on the readiness of the airport to reopen in August, and I shared a video of a robot which was at the airport, and people just viewed, many people, and it was shared across the continent. So this is something that happens spontaneous. I don't plan, but things just happen that way. So even influencing in a way, maybe on Instagram, it's very intentional and deliberate. You have to post certain pictures, then people come and follow you for that type of
Edward, thank you very much. We are running out of time. Unfortunately, we can't read all the tweets we have, so we're going to get into the closing remarks section of the show. And I would like to start with
a quick comment. also tweeted about knowing what you're doing. And you have earned $1 million. Before you go around influencing as they don't necessarily correlate.
We are facing a lot of pressure. We are under a lot of. And so, as far as I'm concerned, we have to do every
conversation we've had tonight in terms of influencers, social media, and ethics in Rwanda.
Thank you once again, Diana. I want to come back to doing bad by influencing, but to avoid people judging them not to be independent, advert is sponsored or has been paid for. Transparency, and it will be strict about the numbers of followers. I think we have to make a difference between celebrity and influencers. Having a good number of people following you, maybe following you because you're celeb, so it's out of celebrity, but for it to influence, as Charlie was saying, you have to make sure that you understand your area of influence. For example, if you want to influence agriculture policies, develop your niche in that. Influence the youth, influence
Emmanuel, thank you very much. Absolutely, your point on a celebrity as well as the issue of
I'll be thrown into a den of lions and they will devour me. That almost happened. But I think if you assess the social media industry in Rwanda, it's well segmented. I don't think we have a challenge where the way Emmanuel mentioned that if you are to post about agriculture, then be it agriculture. I think it's very segmented. If you look at the sports side, we have people like David Bayingana, like Jalik, people who have built names over the years on the radio, and then they eventually became
Edmund, I'll ask you to just give your closing remark, please.
So for me, I think this is just an industry that is developing, and we shouldn't be quick to judge and throw people and throw people under the bus. Let's see how the situation unfolds globally, and then we'll see how things get by.
Thank you very much to you, Edmund. I think you did very well on the show. Thank you very much to Emmanuel. Thank you for joining. Brenna, as always, and Charles, it's always a pleasure to have you. To our viewers, thank you for tuning in. Our partners, Uzi Collections and Bourbon Coffee, thank you for always supporting The Square. Keep the conversation going on social media using the hashtag The Square RW. Thank you for tuning in. Have a good night and see you again next week.